Hey, what's up? Welcome to another episode of The Clackbox. If you are listening on any platform, thank you so much for listening. If you are listening on iTunes, please leave a review on any platform you are. It'd be awesome to hear your comments and feedback. I am actually on the road at my sister's house, and her daughter Abby just fell over something, and we laughed at it, so it's pretty funny. Yeah, so we're here with Tara Clackler, who technically is my sister-in-law, who was also a student in my youth ministry, to tell you how old I am. And so known her a long time. Before she was my sister, I knew her. And so she is here. Her daughter Abby is here hanging around. So if you hear some noise in the background, it's just Abby, my beautiful niece being crazy and silly. So hi, Tara.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. You're going to get a little...
Okay. Is that better? How's that?
Good.
Okay.
So we're here in your house.
Yeah.
We like your house.
We're in my living room. Thank you.
We are in your living room.
I do love my house. Yeah.
We're very jealous of your kitchen, actually. Yeah.
A lot of work went into that.
We talk about it often.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So we're here. So we're working on, you were 15 when we met?
Yeah, I think so.
And you're more than 15 now. So we've known each other
I'm
for...
only 29. Just kidding.
We've known each other for, we'll just say...
Almost 20 years.
Almost 20 years.
Yeah.
Which is a long time.
Yeah. It is a long time.
Over half your life.
Yeah.
I've known you over half your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, really cool knowing you. I said you were my sister-in-law. You sang at my wedding.
Yes.
Our wedding.
Uh-huh.
And that was awesome.
Yeah.
We've gone through a lot of life together.
Mm-hmm.
Especially you and Allison, especially in the last few years, which I love.
Yeah.
Love that. So you and I could talk about a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We could talk about, you spent time at Belmont in Nashville.
Yep.
And you have a degree from there.
Yes. Commercial music degree.
Commercial music degree.
Uh-huh.
Abby's beatboxing.
Yeah. She's going to shatter glass ceilings because, that's a male-dominated field.
Yeah. She's going to have some kind of bass going on.
Yeah.
Then, so Belmont, lived there for a while.
11 years in Nashville.
Wow.
Yeah. Came back 5 years ago, like this coming week.
Really?
Yeah.
You've been back 5 years already?
Yeah, I know.
Thank goodness.
How long have you been back?
2.5 years, over 2.5 years from Idaho.
Thank
so
goodness.
we've actually been back longer than we were there.
Yeah, good.
Thank
glad
goodness.
You're here.
We're glad to be back. We could talk about that. We could talk about the music industry because I have so many thoughts and opinions and questions on that. Right.
So do I.
And so do you.
Yes.
We could talk about worship.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I could go on for days.
Which is a huge passion of both of ours.
We'll touch on it a little.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a passion to sing. You have a passion to sing well.
It's okay. You have the Clackler curse.
The Clackler curse.
You all sing in the key of X is what I like to say.
We have Ellie, though.
That's true.
Our saving grace is Ellie.
Yes, Ellie's going to fix it all.
Thank
Abby
goodness.
might as well. She likes to sing.
We have. Maybe it's a new generation of stuff.
There we go.
Yeah. We were praying the other day, and you guys were at our house the other day, and I threw out what I was amazed by you and what God's done in your life over the last few years was this. You didn't wait for a level of healing to move forward,
right?
And to start walking down a path, even the path of starting to sing again, seeing God use you in that. And a lot of us, I think we wait for a level of healing before we move forward. We feel like I've got to stay here and get some form of being whole or whatever.
Yeah.
And then we move forward.
Right.
So I want to talk about your journey of healing.
Yeah.
And I may ask some questions as we go.
Definitely.
But do you want to introduce that topic
Sure.
a little bit, or do you want me to introduce the scenario of that?
I can introduce it.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you interject if there's anything I miss, because you've seen it from an outsider's view. And so I think that your observation of it is really valid and probably helpful for those listening, since I was kind of, in the middle of it. Sometimes I don't know what was happening on the peripheral. But
okay.
So to set the stage, as I like to call it, my elevator speech of my life, is, at 21 weeks pregnant, the day before my 12-year anniversary with my ex-husband, who is your brother, we sat down and had a really long conversation where he shared with me that he was in love with someone else that from his past that I didn't know existed. And so that kind of jump started obviously trauma, but it also jump-started about a 1.5 year process of healing and a journey that I would say is like as on epic proportions as Lord of the Rings. It feels like that I went to Mordor. I mean, I've done all the things.
Precious.
Yes,
Yeah, that's terrible.
I've tried to find my precious.
Never do that again. Sorry.
Please don't. Anyway, so as I was thinking through and as you and I talked about setting up for this, I felt that what would be most helpful for those listening is not just hearing about the trauma. And, I fortunately, the Lord really helped me not to ever have a victim mentality. So really it was more of looking at my journey as how do I turn this into an opportunity and become a victor through it? How do I actually catapult myself from this trauma into even greater growth? And so I can tell you sitting here today that my life looks better now than it did the day before that terrible day where I had that conversation. And I didn't think that was possible, but it was, and it's what happened. So that's pretty much the notes that I put together was how the Lord kind of curated and aggregated all of these different pieces of healing to kind of, when you look back, you see the big picture. So one of the things that someone shared with me, I can't remember who, was that it's like a tapestry. If you ever see how tapestries are put together, they're beautiful on the front, but on the back it's like a hot mess of thread and string and it looks crazy, right? And so that's what I feel like the healing journey is that it's putting together this beautiful picture, but all I could see was the back of it. So it's just like these are knots and string hanging everywhere and it looks like a giant mess. And so, but when you turn it around, you're like oh. So that's what basically 1.5 years of that has been happening. So that's kind of what I've prepared and what I wanted to share is just all those different pieces.
And I think what's important to know about, and what's frustrating, it's just incredibly maddening, is that the whole process of like, and you'll probably reference this verse, is that the good works that God has done in you, He will finish. Like I will finish the good works that I've started in you, and so yes, we do have this cataclysmic moment that started this, but that doesn't mean there wasn't the healing and what was going on wasn't before that, and it wasn't after that. Now you do have this peak, and I'm not diminishing the peak of that kind of like, oh, here we are. There's the wound, there's the salt, there's the cut, you ripped me open, all that. Yeah. But so I think I don't want to highlight too much on that. Right. But you have this moment and you're wounded. You're ripped open. Everything's on the floor. Yeah. What do you do? Where do you go?
Oh, man. I will tell you that looking back on that piece, like, what I want to encourage people who may be finding themselves in that place is you don't even know if you can breathe, right? You're not even sure you can get up, get out of bed, function. I forgot to eat. Like it was, and I was pregnant. So I was losing weight while I was pregnant. My midwives were getting upset with me. And so I think all you can do in that is just literally cry out for help and involve community. That was probably one of the first pieces, was that I can't. I think Abby is saying caca. That's great. But I wouldn't say there's any like big wonderful thing that helps you heal in the midst of just the initial wound. It's really just stay alive, function, survive. And the best way that I knew to do that was to ask for help. And so, I mean, that day, the first thing I did was get in my car and drive to my parents' house at midnight at night. I could hardly see, but that's where I knew to go. I knew to go to people who love me and would take care of me. And that's essentially what started it, and letting them in.
I think that's good, because I kind of, as we're talking about the C2 forms of pain, of hurt, of wounding, of being wounded, is you have a moment of it where like even like stuff blindsides you. Yeah. But you do have it's a longer story in that. So there's almost two types. So on the type of like, I just got hit by a truck. What your first move was to go directly to whoever it was, loved you through it. Do you think that's normal?
I think that, I don't know if I would call it normal. don't know that there is a normal in that. You know, it's you're not built for that. It's not supposed to happen. Your body, your brain, your psyche, your emotions, your spirit, none of that is supposed to ever happen to you. So it's functioning within the most dysfunctional moment that you're going to experience. So I think that for me, it was, what are my other options? My other option was to internalize and try to deal with it on my own, which I think a lot of people do.
And that's what I was going to ask. Are you a hider?
I was.
I think I would have hid.
Yeah, I was. I think one of the benefits of this last season was it drove me back to community, because for, about a decade, I locked everyone out of my life, and I just kind of internalized and became apathetic and bitter and tired, and just functioned every day without really letting people see what was really going on. And I was also 700 miles away from everyone that loved me, so it was easy to do, right? You could put on this face. I only saw them 2 or 3 times a year, so I could say, yeah, everything's great. And it wasn't.
Well, I've shared this, that my response to a lot of that was you take I'm not gonna throw this on anybody else. I will own this. My role was, how you doing? And it stopped. There was no really hardcore press into like, really? Like, you really doing good? Like, to anybody involved in the situation while y'all were in Nashville. And I so I'm not putting that on anybody else. I know that was, I don't know how other people handled it.
Right.
Well,
I can speak, for my family, healthy boundaries is a really important piece of how we all function. And so if I'm not letting you in, then how far can you push it? It's like there's a point where my parents would try, or my friends or my brother, would try, but when I'm not willing, there's not much they can do. So I had to own that.
Was there a version of not willing or not realizing?
No, I think it was more of a pride of, I don't want people to see, because generally in life, I have my stuff together, like I generally am pretty, successful at whatever I put my mind to. You can look at my career, even as a mother, like I take those things very seriously, can control it. And my marriage wasn't that way. And so I saw it as a failure. I saw that I've failed, and I didn't want people to see that because I was prideful. And so it was really vanity and just,
pride.
Yeah, totally.
Totally pride.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the image that my family had of me, I wanted to maintain that. The Tara that they saw before is who I wanted to still be. So I tried really hard to continue to paint that picture. So I was very aware. And I worked very hard.
So that kind of closed off a little bit of the community.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now you have this moment. So your first response, even knowing you had kind of blocked out community a little bit, authentic community, was to not hide.
Right.
And no matter what the cost, jump right into it.
Absolutely.
Because you drive to your parents that night at midnight. It's a 25 minute drive. That's a lot of time to stop and turn the car around.
Right.
Knowing that all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I've got to let all of the walls down.
Yep.
And they're going to see into absolutely everything.
Yep. Yeah.
And I know your parents. Your parents are just amazing people.
They are, yeah.
I respect and love your mom. Your dad a little. Tim a little bit. But your mom?
Oh, yeah.
For sure, right?
Yeah.
She's kind of been my mom for a long time.
Yeah.
She's known me since I was 19, 20 years old.
And you worked with her, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I'm just kidding, Tim. Don't hate me. But, Mama Gina, you're great. You kind of, there was a predictable response, though, even though you were letting everything down.
Yeah.
I guess that's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah.
You knew there was going to be a predictable response, but I think a lot of us hide.
Oh, yeah.
So what motivated you to not hide?
So I didn't know how to function. Being pregnant, I think was a game changer. I think if I hadn't been pregnant, I would have handled everything very differently. But when you have a human life inside of you that you're responsible for their destiny, their emotional well-being. And, I've done enough research to believe that babies can experience trauma in the womb. I've read about it and I understand that. So it was like, how do I go about this the best way possible to protect her and set her up for success.
Right.
And I couldn't do it on my own. And I knew that. And who loves her more than I do, or at least as much as I do? Her grandparents. Arguably, she loves them more than she loves me. Last night, Gigi, Papa, Gigi, Papa. So
the more she realizes the gifts that come, it'll get worse.
Yeah. So she was definitely a huge factor in how my healing went, was because I wasn't just doing it for me, you know. And I think I would have probably internalized more if it had just been me. I probably would have like turned to alcohol. I'm not kidding when I say that. Like, there's times where I just wish I could have just drowned out everything, but I couldn't. Right. You know, a lot of the coping mechanisms people use in trauma weren't available to me. Because,
do you feel like that was God's provision and protection?
Absolutely. Yeah, I do. It definitely made me legacy minded. It made me like, you know, 10 years from now,
that's
how do I want, like, even now I make choices based on how I would have a conversation with her around them. So when she's old enough to understand what's happening or what happened, I want to be able to say, Mommy did everything she could. Mommy put you first. Mommy put us first. And so that definitely was a game changer as to how I made choices and decisions. And it's almost to the point where I don't think, you know, people look at me and they're like, I couldn't have done what you did. And I'm like, well, I would have said the same thing if I was in your shoes looking. But when you have a human inside of you, it, you know, it should change everything.
And I say this a lot about people. Because I'm get amazed with people who get cancer. Mm-hmm. How do you have, like, the only way to discover if you have it is to walk through it. Mm-hmm. So then we don't hide. We try to see the light at the end of the tunnel, which a lot of people say that, like, oh, this too shall pass.
Right.
And when you're in the pan, you're like, shut up.
Yeah.
I want to punch you.
I'm flipping people off inside. Yeah. Yeah.
Jesus inside of me loves you, but I don't.
Yeah. I was like, okay, sure. And it does, and they're right. But at the time it didn't.
But
it didn't really speak volumes.
Strangle.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then what?
Well, you know, one of the things I think you and I were talking about before we started recording was the whole principle of healing is a process and a journey. It is not a destination. You do not just arrive there. You don't just do one thing and you become healed. So for me, I remember one of the first things I'll say is get a therapist. And I'm not kidding.
If you don't have one.
Yeah, if you don't have one, you need one.
And we're not kidding about that.
No, I'm not joking at all.
It's always good to have what. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just because you haven't gone through something doesn't mean you don't need one.
Right. And if everyone wants to find me, my name is Tara Clackler, and I can refer a really wonderful one. But so that was even a divine thing too. I was at my chiropractor, who I found online because I was looking for a prenatal certified one, and I'm face down on her table. She's adjusting me, and she's like, what's going on with you? And even though I'd run to my family.
Totally forgot about this.
Oh, yeah. Even though I'd run to my family, I wasn't telling other people. Like, a lot of my extended family had no idea because I was really trying to honor him and cover him with the hope that there would be reconciliation. And I didn't want to make it harder on him than it had to be. And so I really didn't tell a lot of people. I mean, you remember it took me forever to finally tell Allison and you loop you all in. But so I'm face down. My chiropractor, who is an amazing Christian and very intuitive and, you know, very strong Holy Spirit on her, she was like, what's going on with you? And I'm face down and I just burst into tears. And I'm like, you know, and I fill her in. And she was like, she goes, I could feel something. She's like, can I pray over you? So she did. And then she was like, well, I can recommend a good therapist. So she did. She recommended Jessica, who's my therapist, and I've seen her now almost for 2 years. And she's EMDR certified. She's LPC. So I recommend someone who can toggle between dealing with trauma, the psychological aspect, but she's also equipped in like the freedom ministry at my church too, in her healing. So she could do all three things and kind of transition depending on what I needed. Right. So she kind of approached me from more of a holistic aspect. And so I highly recommend that. But anyways, part of what she helped me see is that movement is key. Doesn't matter how far, if it's an inch. Like if you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. If you can't crawl, get someone to push you, you know, like, like that, you just have to move. And a lot of times when you're in a relational trauma where there's another factor, another person, you're waiting for them to do something. You're hoping that whatever you do is going to push them as well. And she would say, hey, that's our hope. But even if he never moves, or even if he regresses, or even if he walks away completely, which is what essentially happened, you still moved, right? You're still a mile ahead from where you were before. And that's the key here is your movement, your healing.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
Do you think, I think it's really important, my opinion, is to not lose your identity to anyone, even a marriage. You can have an amazing marriage. I think Alice and I have an amazing marriage, but we don't lose our identity to each other. Kind of what we were referencing about my tattoo on my arm. Now I'm tatted up.
Yeah.
And
it does look really good for those listening.
Oh.
I mean, my response was I wouldn't put that on my body, but it looks great.
Thank you. But do you? I totally forgot now where I was going with this. Do you think that movement, like you just said, whether they move, whether it's a relational or not, no matter what happens to them, movement for you is a part of solidifying your own identity. It's a part of. Have I lost myself too much to them to where they dictate the healing?
Right.
They dictated the wound. Now do they dictate the healing?
Right.
Versus am I going to have movement myself?
Right. Well, and that was a huge part. So one of my list of a dozen things that the Lord curated for me for healing was returning to myself. One of the things that was a huge part of my healing, which we'll get to, is worship and music and stuff. But lyrics are a huge important thing to me. And so I think there's a Rita Springer song that says it's in Defender, when I lost myself, or you know what I'm talking about. Gosh, now I'm drawing a blank, but you picked up all my pieces, you put me back together. You want your blanket? Go get your blanket. When I thought I lost myself, you knew where I left me, something like that. When I lost myself, you knew where I left me.
Okay,
you reintroduced me to myself, basically. And so like that, I'm butchering it, but those were some of the lyrics that were important to me. Was I had lost myself. To your point, within that relationship, my identity had gotten very covered up and buried. So as soon as this started.
Oh, can I interrupt?
Yeah.
I'm a jerk.
What?
I feel like God's telling me something.
Okay.
So I think pain leads us away from our true self. I think it highlights our we get these coping mechanisms that don't necessarily, they're coping mechanisms. They're not dealing with it, right? And I think I think for you particularly, and if I'm jumping off a cliff that there was no parachute, I apologize. But I think for you,
I'll tell you.
You have these two things of pain. You and I've never really talked about this, so this is going to get raw.
Okay.
I think you have these two things.
I'm not scared.
Okay, like the moment and the history.
Yep.
Now, through the history, you were slowly being chiseled away from your natural tendency of what you were with a coping mechanism. I think it was so slow. It was kind of like the frog in the boiling water thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you gravitated away from worship.
Right. Yeah.
Is that a fair?
Absolutely.
Okay. Which is a natural thing of who God's created you to be. If you were a tribe, you'd be a Levite, right? Like that's the whole thing.
Absolutely.
So that's why I think this was a key part of God bringing you back to you, because it's naturally who you were.
Right.
Okay, so that I wanted to get that in there.
Absolutely.
But I think it's so key to the context of for you, of God reintroducing you to you. So now we're in this moment. How did worship come in to play to it?
Well, if I can step back, though, because I'm thinking of the listener, it's not about worship or singing for everyone. It's about who God created you to be, your gifting. So like I have this cool story. So I was in an Uber recently because I travel for work some, and the woman, I barely had gotten in her vehicle. I was shutting the door and she was like, I don't have many girlfriends. I need dating advice. And I was like, what the heck? What kind of Uber did I just get into? And
Oops, Uber.
Yeah, I was like, oh man. And I'm tired, I'm on a trip. I got a little critical internally, because I can do that where I'm like snarky inside. And she starts to share with me about this man that she's been dating, and her husband died a year ago. And as I start to hear her story unfold, I feel the Holy Spirit say, hey, I put you here. Like, get your crap together. Stop being a jerk. I was like, okay. So I had to quickly shift internally. But as I began to listen to her, I heard her saying, that she was basically repeating cycles of a former abusive relationship. And I thought, this isn't good. And I just said, hey, can I be bold? You've invited me in and you've asked for my advice. You're not ready to date. And she was like, you're right, I'm not. And and I was like, listen, sister, here's my story. Here's what I've been through. And here's how I've gotten to the point where I do think I am ready to date finally. And thank you, Abby. She's putting a blanket on me, saying blanket. So anyways, one of the pieces of advice I gave her, and this is what I would say as it relates to worship for me or singing for me, is that when you begin to go through healing and go back to the giftings and the things that you care about, then you start to uncover who you are. And that's part of healing. So for me, it was singing. So you've referenced, I have a music degree, went to Belmont and graduated in 2007. And I think the last time I sang publicly was in 2007. And I think I sang at my brother's wedding after that once. So maybe one other time. But so yes, you're right. The pain and the slow erosion of what I thought was supposed to be my marriage, like all of those things contributed to a large amount of apathy. And that apathy caused me to just kind of stop doing what I cared about. And so I stopped singing for 10 whole years, you know, and then all this went down in 2017. And it was like that 10-year mark. And everyone, and you included, like what's wrong, honey? What's the matter?
I think she bumped the table.
Are you okay?
Did you bump the table? Bad table.
Mean.
Shame on you, table. You
mean,
get
mean?
that table. Yeah, I because I try to consider myself to be a bold person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the midst of everything that was going on, I was like, hey, you want to sing at church?
Yeah. Well, and you weren't the only one, but you were one that actually made it practical. You know, there was several people that came to me and said, hey, the Lord is saying that you're going to have to sing your way out of this. You're going to have to worship, and that's where you're going to find some healing. And it became survival. Like, I honestly haven't listened to anything but worship music for 2 straight years. Like, recently a friend was like, have you heard of this band? And I'm like, nope, I have no idea. I don't know what's going on out there in the music world, because I had to bury myself in worship. My TV had, you know, Bethel worship on it 24/7 for almost 2 years. And so that was how I survived. But I started singing. And at first it was just in my house, you know, and then it was you asking me to come help with youth. I'm giant pregnant up there on the stage, like first time I've led worship ever, probably. And then you introduced me to the creative team in the big church. And then they asked me to sing a Lady Gaga song, which was
that
weird.
was my fault. That was my suggestion. I did
No, it was good. It was, but
look, let's talk about this for a second. It was we're sermon playing, and I asked
trying not to cry during
I asked you during the midst of all of this to sing a million pieces.
Reasons.
Or a million reasons, yeah. I'm a jerk. Let's just put it out there. Yeah. What was that? What was that series?
This Is Us.
It was the This Is Us series.
Yeah.
Talking about commitment.
Right.
And I asked you to sing a million reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The sermon was about like forgiveness and reconciliation. And that was when I was still in the midst of believing for that. So it was like, Lord, I'm just going to do this in faith. And
everybody that, like, there wasn't a whole lot of people that knew the story, but there was a couple of people that knew that were just like,
from leadership. Yeah.
Yeah. Just like, Cody's a jerk for asking, but how is she even doing this?
Yeah. Well, but again, even back to your point earlier, healing is putting one foot in front of the other. It's not having arrived. Like, I wasn't in a place where I was reconciled and could speak from like testimony. I was still in the process of walking it out. None of us knew what was going to happen, but yet I still got up there and sang that song. And I meant it, you know.
Right.
You've given me a million reasons, but yet I'm still standing here and I'm enduring, and I'm still your wife, and I'm still fighting for this. And, you know, and I had people in my life, my dad, who would say, you're wasting your love on him because he doesn't get this. And I remember thinking, am I an idiot? Like, why am I still sitting here enduring this? And I still felt the Lord wanted me to, and I was being obedient. But one thing my therapist said is, she was like, this isn't for him. This is for you. Like, you're learning how to love unconditionally.
This is you learning to love unconditionally.
Right. And whether I get reap the reward with him or someone else, I'm still learning something that's being forged in fire. You know, it's like
Mordor.
Yeah, Mordor.
Aren't you?
Your foot? Let me see.
Aren't you? God's goal in all of us is to get us to be more like him.
Right.
So this is really hard to say, but aren't you having to become more like him?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Through all that?
Yeah. It reminds me of one day I you know, it was really hard to function, obviously, especially in the first few months after everything. And so I'd be sitting there working, staring at my computer Fortunately, I worked from home, thank the Lord. But I would be, staring at my laptop, and it would be like 2 p.m. I'm like, I don't know what to do. So I would just get up and go walk, in my neighborhood, and there's a little trail. So I was walking down the trail one day, and the Lord said, are you ready to partner with me? It's like, what do you mean? You and I love him more than anyone in this entire world. Will you partner with me to love him?
And you're like, no.
No, I said yes. I was like, absolutely. And so it was really a journey of Jesus and I hand in hand loving him, And I mean, you know his story, right? Better than probably me prior to meeting him, obviously, you're his brother. But I don't know that he had anyone love him unconditionally in that way ever in his life. So even to this day, as much as, there's parts of me that are like, I don't get it. Like, why, Lord, did you have me do all these things? But at the same time, like, hi. He knows what that looks like now, Hold me. Oh, I love you.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, golly, that's so darn cute right there.
Abby just hugged me. Hold you.
So you're starting to walk through. You said sing your way out of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What does that mean?
I think for me, it was, this is what I was built to do. So again, for whomever's listening, what are you built to do? What makes you come alive? And especially if you haven't done it and for a long time, like that, the Lord built you to do that. So when you do what you're built for, you're operating out of not just who you are, but what the kingdom looks down and goes, oh, finally Tara's doing what she's supposed to do. Like that's going to hit heaven harder than anything else. Right. And so for me, singing, it's so funny because now when I sing, like I went to a worship concert the other night and I'm glad it was really loud in there because I was singing so hard and so loud that like I would have blown someone's eardrums out had it been quieter. But, in that moment, I feel completely myself and like I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do.
Well, I want to throw this out there because I think too, like, well, I sing too, right? I sing. Mm-hmm. You never want to stand next to me during worship, right? Especially like at camp, it's on.
It's a joyful note.
But I don't think God's looking down and going, like, I know He enjoys it. That's not what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
But for me, mine thing is when I get out on the soccer field, even if it's just a kid's soccer practice, and I got the ball at my feet, I think God's going. Like he's entertained by that, right? Even though it's just a kind of a weird, I don't do it all the time now or whatever. I think that's when he's like super entertained. And so I think for you, and so there's other people, it could be, I think a lot of people would assume that's like when I'm speaking. No, I think God's like, yeah, I put that in him, but that's not. So for other people, it could be like, if it's organization, that's your thing, right? And God's like, yes, now I'm enjoying watching you organize this, or I'm enjoying watching you do this. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, whatever it is that makes someone tick. Yeah. And I think God put something unique. I mean, my dad, it's flying. Like he feels closest to God and he feels at peace when he's flying. And he went years and years and years without flying an airplane. Maybe I should clarify. Not just randomly flying. And then
that would be amazing.
Yeah. American Airlines. I got to book a flight just so I can fly. No, he has a small
No one
champ.
feels close to God.
No, not when you're breathing recycled farts. No. No.
Yeah. He has a single.
Yeah. Little champ. Yeah. But anyways, he didn't have that for a long time. And so he went years without flying and now he does, so
your mom when she's doing bookkeeping.
Yeah. Man, that woman can work so hard, harder than anyone I know. But anyways,
when
yes.
She's CFO and something, she's in her wheelhouse.
Yeah, till 4 a.m. She just works her tush off. But anyways, so yeah, I would say whatever it is that makes you tick. And a lot of times people don't know, I know people that are like, I don't know. And I would argue that maybe it's because you haven't gone through your healing, because when you start to pursue healing, those things will start to bubble up because they're part of your healing. Like the Lord will bring them up. So if you don't know what makes you tick, you don't know your passions, you're kind of like, I have no idea, then go get a therapist because there's something there.
Well, and just try things. Like you said, movement. It just take a step.
Yep. One of the pieces of healing for me was I'm on the board for a professional association of talent development. And one of the speakers talked about prototyping your life. And so if there's something that interests you, go do it if you have to job shadow someone, or you have to find someone who doesn't, and say, hey, can I tag along with you for a day? Just try, see what it's like, go out there and do it. And so I did several different things trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And there were things that you're like, heck no, like hated it. But that's not a failure. It's like Edison. There's 800 ways that we don't make light bulbs now. That's how I felt. Just because it wasn't for me doesn't mean that I failed and wasted time. Abby's going, she's agreeing.
She's nodding.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was interesting too, is we're not talking about like a job or a calling. Like, that's not what we're talking about at all.
It could be anything.
Yeah, we're talking about just something that just you feel, I don't know how to describe it.
Drawn to.
You feel like you can sit in, like it's a groove kind of thing, and you don't have to do it all the time. But it's just like, I guess the term is therapeutic would be that, and I think it's different for everyone. Now, for you, it's specifically like, and it is like your dad, it is one of those things that you feel close to God, because I feel like he's finding enjoyment in it, and then he's just going to kind of like nurture the soul in that. Some people, it could be just sketching. It could be reading. It could be sitting out in nature. It could be fishing. It could, whatever that is. It's, I don't know if this is true, but I would think it's kind of one of the first things that we start to not do. Yeah. Where we paralyze ourselves. And I think for your story of healing, and because I want to talk about some of these other things, is what did you find yourself being paralyzed from? So one was obviously singing, right? Probably worship. And we can find a lot of ways where Satan tries to get us to not do those things. It feels uncomfortable. Where do I go to church? You didn't really have a home church at the time either. No. And then somebody's asking you to lead worship, and you're like, I really haven't worshiped in a long time. Right. And my idiot brother-in-law is asking me to lead worship. Right. And so there's reasons for that. So what else? Yeah. So
you brought up the church thing. So that I would say is on my list here is that find a church. That's part of the community piece, but it's also being fed. And so there were weekends where I literally went to church twice. Like I would go to the one I ended up finding, which was a God thing in and of itself. And I'd go there Saturday night, and then I'd go to my parents' church Sunday morning, and I'd get prayer both times. Go to the front, get prayer, use the resources. I was not ashamed. And almost every time I got prayer, I walked away with a new word, a new nugget, as I would call it, a new little piece to like hold on to, And if I go back in my journal, I've got 2 300-page college ruled journals that are completely full.
Holy guacamole.
Yeah, he's looking at one of them right now.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, look at this. This is the second one. I mean, almost every detail of every day when I went through that. Well, I think the Lord told me I'm going to write a book, so I had to put that together.
I just got arthritis looking at that.
Yeah. And I'm not succinct. I'm not very succinct. Yeah. I'm a very verbose person. So I wrote out paragraphs.
What's verbose mean?
Wordy.
Wordy. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I should know what that word means because I am.
Yeah, you are. That's why this podcast will be 5 hours. I'm just kidding. Anyways, so yes, I got lots and lots of prayer, and then I took almost everything people would speak over me and walk away with that. So one of the fruits that came of that, so I'll just move to another thing on my list, was touch. So touch is my second love language, and it was not my ex's love language at all. I probably was touched very little for about a decade, and so I just turned it off. You don't realize you turn things off, but you do. Singing off, that kind of thing. So I went up to get prayer one evening at my church, and the woman, Veronica, if you're listening, thank you. She was praying over me. And at the end, she embraced me. And, it's one of those, like, you're like, blanket. Here you go, baby. You're like, okay, cool. There's a nice little hug, like pat, pat. Okay, she's still hugging me. All right, now we're moving into, did she forget to let go? Nope, she's still going. Okay. All right, so pat, pat. Nope. Okay, we're still going. And then you get into, okay, now I feel awkward. And this stranger is embracing me, like, for a long time. And then it moved into, what do I do? Like, I had all this wave of emotion of, I just wanted to back away.
Yeah, how do I get out of this?
Yeah. And then the Holy Spirit said, stay there. I was like, okay. And in that moment, I just started weeping. And she kept holding me and holding me and holding me. And the Lord was like, this is a key to your healing. Here's another key. I felt like he would give me keys, like these little keys that I would collect. So I had a giant keychain at the end of this, and one of those keys was touch. And I realized like I need it. That's how I function. And I hadn't had it for so long. Even my mom, who will kiss my entire face 3,000 times and hold me and touch me, I wouldn't even let her do it. You know, it was like I had just kind of shut it all off. And so after that, did you want to ask me a question?
No, go ahead.
Okay. He's like,
yeah, I have a comment, but I'm trying to remember it.
Yeah. After that, when I saw my dad next, I was like, hey, Dad, the Lord talked to me about this that touches a piece of my healing. So I'm going to ask you to hold my hand and hold me and hug me and rub my back and play with my hair. And he's like, absolutely, whatever you need, just let me know. And same thing with my mom. So when my mom would come up to me and try to kiss me 1,000 times on my face, I didn't go stop like I would normally do. I stood there and I took it, and it felt painful at first because I was so used to just being like, ugh, stop it. And so I would just take it. And I told my friends, Becca and Nikki, Becca's love language is touch. So I was like, guess what? And she's like, yes.
Well, my inhale was what I'm hearing is a rediscovery of you.
Absolutely.
A total rediscovery of you through that as well. Like
Absolutely.
This is actually how I was created, but I was coping through long-term pain and short-term trauma of coping instead of and losing myself.
Absolutely.
To that.
Yeah.
And so he's rewiring you. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's a lot of uncovering, unburying. I just actually played a song for Cody when he walked in called The Awakening by Amanda Cook. And that's how I feel. I feel like that whole journey was awakening and realizing who I am. I was asleep, but now my eyes are opened and I can't go back. You know? And that's part of healing, is just uncovering who you really are. And a lot of that was like, I even was challenged by my therapist to go ask people who knew me pre-marriage and say, what did you remember about me?
Oh, that's dangerous.
Yeah. And it was hard to hear. Yeah. And I remember like the word that 2 people said was, you were effervescent. And I wasn't anymore after I got married. Like that effervescence went away. It got buried. And so then it's that rediscovering how do I be that way now? How does that work? And one of the things that Nikki said, she was like, you used to sing constantly, like in the car, at the dining room table, like no matter where we are at, you were singing. And she was right. And I'd stopped. And so, yeah, it was freeing, and I had permission to go back to that. And my brother was a great source of that because he's known me my whole life. And I was like, so you tell me. My friend Tara, she knew me before I was married at college. You tell me. And so I would again, curated is my word that I like to use, was just collecting all of these different pieces of what other people saw in me, and then going, that's who I am. How do I get back to that? Yeah.
This is, again, what you're saying is striking another chord here, is I think that we have a tendency as parents to stifle things like that because we find them annoying, right? Yep. And even as siblings, because one of the things that we deal with is Ellie's kind of like that too. She just wants to sing all the time, dance and flail herself around, and Tate's the prim and proper, sit up straight, cross your legs, right?
Yep.
And so he's like, Ellie, just stop singing, just stop, right? And it as a parent, I'm like, hey, and I've caught myself, instead of going, hey, stop, hey. Like, you could totally be free to do that upstairs.
Absolutely.
Because we don't want to stifle that. And I think as spouses,
like, how do we channel it but not stifle it, right?
As spouses, we can do that.
Yeah.
Our world can do that to us. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting.
And I think too, it speaks of where you're at. If you're stifling someone else, it's because, you aren't comfortable with who you are, and you don't know how to be free in yourself. So then you stifle it in other people because you don't know how to process what they're doing, because you don't, you've locked away your own. So that's a challenge for me too as a mother, is that I want Abby to be fully herself, and I don't want to not be free myself and then, project that on her. So to be the mother that she needs, I've got to be free. I've got to be the person that I fully am, or I'll just suppress it in her too.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So what's another key?
Another key, let's see, I'm looking at my list.
My wife just got giddy when you said list.
Oh, yeah. I'm tempted to start crossing things out as we talk about them, but I won't. That would make me happy, though. I would say one that I hated the most was rest. I got that word so much. Like when I went to get prayer, prophetic words, even reading in my devotionals, if it came up like resting, I was like, because I am such an action results oriented person that healing became a mission for me. Like, I'm going to get healed. Dang it.
I'm going to check it off the list.
Yeah. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do all the things. And so, it became.
And a little bit of revenge towards the aggressor.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like, I want to be fully who I'm supposed to be so I can move on,
Yeah.
And the thing is that a big piece of healing is sometimes you got to stop and you have to just rest and trust the Lord that he's going to move you when you need to be moved in the right timing and the right people. And he's orchestrating all these details in the back and you can't control it all. And so I honestly had to go like YouTube videos on rest, like Bill Johnson, rest, Graham Cook, rest, different pastors, and then just listen to him. And there's one 12-minute one that I listened to, I kid you not, like 10 times because I still couldn't get it. I was like, I stink at rest. Terrible at it.
And I want to ask a clarifying question. Do you think what you're talking about is different than patience?
Yes.
Okay.
Which is
right.
Ball of wax.
And I don't know if he gave you that if that's a key or no, but if it's kind of just built into this. But I think what's we have to define rest a little bit. One way to define it is it's not patience.
No.
Patience or waiting is not what we're talking about. So define, when you say rest and find rest, what exactly are you talking about?
Rest is self-care partly, which I'm not very good at. So it was, hey, let's go on what?
Did God force you to discover self-care?
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's good. He did. I mean, it was like, go get massages, go, when you're in trauma, your body is freaking out. Like emotional, psychological, and spiritual trauma all translate to physical, which I'll get to that too. There's a physical aspect to my healing as well. But I definitely had to take breaks, and like my mom made me go away for a spa weekend, and I would struggle with, Mom, I don't know how to rest. Like right now, all I want to do is get on my knees and pray for my marriage. And she's like, you have to trust the Lord that he's going to handle what he needs to handle, and you can take a break. Like, there are angels fighting on your behalf right now. Why don't you just let them and just breathe, just go get a massage, get a pedicure, stop thinking about it, eat ice cream, like whatever it is, which I can't do anymore. We'll talk about that. But yeah, self-care was part of the rest piece, was releasing and just trusting. Hi. She's laying on the couch going, hi. That was part of rest. I think the other part is not controlling. Control is a big thing for me. So the root of control is fear. So you can't rest and fear at the same time.
You can't rest and fear at the same time?
No. Yeah. Yeah, because when you're in fear, you're trying to control stuff. When you're trying to control things, you're not resting. You're not trusting him. So trust and rest have some synonymous characteristics, I think, between the two as well.
It's good. I feel like I'm going to meditate on that for a little bit.
Yeah.
The next couple days. That's good.
Okay. I was like, do you want to meditate while I'm quiet, or do you want me to keep going?
Not right now, because Abby will fall asleep.
Yeah, she looks like she's about to.
Yeah. She's sticking her tongue out at me.
So another piece was the physical piece, which I think we just were talking about. And so, post-pregnancy, my body, when you're pregnant, your body functions at the highest level it possibly can because it's growing another life, right? So my body was, despite the fact that I wasn't eating very well, and that, thank goodness for my community. I mean, my sister-in-law, Rachel, added me to her meal plan and would bring me food every week. And
I know, every time we were over here, somebody was bringing food.
Yeah, that's because my midwife was like, you're losing weight. I don't think you're supposed to do that when you're pregnant. So, again, they took care of me. But so post-pregnancy, I had several physical things happen, one of which was gallbladder attacks. I was in the ER January of 2018. I actually had dinner with you all the night before, and then I had a 24-hour gallbladder attack to where they were like, you need to have your gallbladder removed. And I was like, absolutely not, because the anesthesia would have ended my milk supply, and Abby was only like 3 or 4 months old. And I was like, not happening. And so my brother has a chiropractor that he's like applied kinesiologist, chiropractor, but also does spiritual healing. He's into like freedom ministry, and really listens to the Lord. He sounds like a whack job.
Yeah.
But my brother was like, what do you have to lose? My sweet, sweet brother took me to the ER, was sitting in there for 6 hours with me. He was toting my milk back and forth after I pumped in like these weird waiting rooms. It was a crazy day. And I'm sitting there doubled over in pain for 24 hours straight. And so he's like, what do you have to lose? Call him and schedule an appointment. And I'm like, okay. So I scheduled it because I'm like, I'm not having a surgery. So I go into this appointment 2 weeks later. I've been in dull pain for 2 weeks waiting for this appointment, refusing to have the surgery. And Dr. Burnley, he's like, so basically I'm going to ask the Holy Spirit to tell me what's going on with you. Is it physical? Is it emotional? Is it spiritual? Is it nutritional? Is it parasitic? Like he has these whole list he goes through. And, and I'm thinking, this sounds crazy. But okay, I'm at this point, I'll do anything, right? Yeah. And so he asked the Lord a couple things. And so what we boiled it down to is that it was spiritual and emotional. And he led me through the prayers of, hey, you asked. He asked me to pray and say, Holy Spirit, what is this? And I, in my mind's eye, saw the word rejection in all caps. And I was like, whew, okay. So this is a physical manifestation of an emotional rejection, which obviously, right, we know I was dealing with that. So he walked me through a prayer. He walked me through basically releasing it, coming out of agreement with it, replacing it with acceptance and adoption and pure love from the Lord and all this stuff. And then he actually physically adjusted my gallbladder, which, what?
Okay, yeah.
Have I lost you yet? Have I lost all the listeners? Don't worry, I was as confused as you all are. So that was January.
There's a doctor out there that just twitched.
Yeah, for my medical doctors, I don't know what to tell you, but it worked. So I walked out of there January 15th, 2018, and I haven't had a single gallbladder pain since. I was healed. So that's one piece of my physical healing. So that just goes to show that your body and your spirit and your mind and your will and your emotions and all of that is all intertwined. So if you're going through a time of healing, your body's going to have to do something. Like you can't get it through all of it without dealing with that piece of it. So everything's so intertwined. So in addition to that, I started losing so much hair, more than you do postpartum. It was more than normal. I went and saw a doctor and it was like, okay, what's going on? She's like, yeah, this isn't normal. Pulled blood work. Your body's supposed to have like 9 antibodies. Mine had 900. She's like,
rock on.
Yeah. So my body was attacking my thyroid. And she said, this is normal post-pregnancy. It's also normal post-trauma. 80% of people who have Hashimoto's have gone through a major trauma. So it was like all playing out physically at this point, right? I'm like, I thought I was good. No, I'm not. And so it started a huge journey that I'm still on right now of physical healing and dealing with the trauma, not only of the immediate major trauma that happened in 2017, but also just like you said, it was a slow breakdown, a slow process, like that frog being boiled in water for a decade. And it was like all coming to a head. Like I had to deal with it and I'd been ignoring it for a decade. And so now I've been on this journey. And like in January, I just decided I want to run a 5K. I've never run a day in my life. I mean, maybe if a bear was chasing me, but being athletic was never one of my things.
I've known you since you're 15. It was not.
No, never. So I signed up for a 5K with my sweet friend, Nikki. Thank God. Again, community, and having people who rally around you. And I just started doing couch to 5K, and my friends bought a running stroller for me because they're wonderful. And we just started doing it 3 days a week. And then this last Saturday, I ran a 5K. And enjoyed it and didn't die. It's like sweet. So again, a big piece of it, of physical healing, it's still going. And in the last mile, I was running by myself and I started running faster than the first 2 miles. And I just felt, and it's a color run, so I'm covered in colored paint, and I just felt like the Lord said, this is your spring. Winter's over. And it's only a few days after spring anyway, like right. Literally. Winter's over and your life is now full of color. And whereas I don't know if you remember this, I used to wear just all black and navy and gray. Like I had no color in my closet.
No pattern, really.
No, and no color in my home. Like my couch was brown and everything else was gray. Like so boring. But if you look at the transformation of even that, and I'm sitting there covered in paint, grinning, as big as you can, running that last mile faster than the first 2, going, oh my gosh, you're so faithful. You know, even in this, like, I didn't think of it as a piece of my healing, signing up for a 5K. I just thought of it as I want to master something. I want to accomplish a goal this year. And even that, he was like, nope, this is a piece of it too. This was one of the keys.
So two things that I'm observing through all of this is you talked about go down front for prayer. Okay. You talked about going to community you're talking about that. And even, I mean, I can say this walking through with you, being part of that community, the sheer weight of every single thing that kept coming. And that was the thing too, is that, being a part of that community, there was things that you were choosing to do that I may not necessarily, I was like, that seems a little, not too far, but just kind of like, I didn't understand. And you're like, I'm going, I'm not stopping. I'm going for my healing. And I think that was key. Not one of the keys that God gave you, but I think that was key too. So do you have another key?
Yeah. It's funny that you're bringing up, is there too much healing? Can you pursue it too much? So about a year and a half ago, so my church has a freedom ministry or inner healing ministry. So if anyone, I would highly encourage you to look into that with your church or surrounding churches. Some churches call it Sozo, some Kairos. Mine calls it Freedom Ministry. There's all kinds of different kinds. But so I had a freedom session a year and a half ago or so, and the same woman who facilitated that one facilitated my most recent one about 2 months ago. And so she's seen me, a year and a half ago, and she saw me recently. And so I would encourage you to do that too, because a therapist is wonderful. Like, there is a psychological aspect that you have to deal with, but there's also, you have a spirit man too. And a lot of times people forget that piece. And so, being able to balance both, like dealing with trauma and doing therapy and EMDR, like there is a place for that, but there's also a place where I have to deal with what's going on with my spirit man and how it's been wounded and lies that I believe and things like that. So I would say that was a huge key. And I think I'd done 3 freedom sessions in the last 2 years. And I think I'm going to continue to do it like at least every 6 months just for cleanup housekeeping. But so when I did my last one a couple months ago, same woman, her name's Donna. And she was like, can I just tell you that you're not even the same human? She was like, holy cow, you've done a 180. And it was really encouraging to hear that. And she goes, but I also want to say that at this point, with the level of pursuit that you're doing with your healing, she's like, it can become an obsession and an idol. And she's like, I think you need to just enjoy the season that you're in.
Oh, wow.
And that was huge to hear that. Yeah. For someone to encourage me to maybe not obsess. So I'd rather have that correction than, hey, you haven't done any healing. So I would say, inner healing is definitely a key, for sure, that the Lord gave me. Also, going back to talking about the victim mentality, those of you who have gone through trauma, even if you didn't deal with it the right way the first time, doesn't mean you can't go back. You still need freedom from it, right? So that trauma, whether it was yesterday or 10 years ago, is an opportunity. It's an invitation from the Lord. It's an invitation to grow, to seek more freedom, and also an invitation to help others. Like, I'm at the point now where I have no problem talking about my story. It doesn't hurt anymore because the Lord has brought me through so much healing. Now I want to use it for other people. Well,
and I've shared this with, God put this on my heart, that I don't think we can have healing from our pain until our pain has a purpose.
Yes, absolutely.
And so a lot of times when we're crying out in pain is, God, give it purpose. This hurts. If you can give it meaning, I will feel better. Now, a lot of that meaning comes after someone else is walking in the same boat.
Right.
And you're going, I know exactly what that's like. Take my hand and we'll take I'll take your first step with you.
Right.
Because I may be on my second, but I'll take your first step with you. And so when God gives meaning to pain, I think then we have, and purpose to it, we start to have healing. But that comes from submitting, going, okay, God, if I'm victim, I'm just laying here.
Right.
But if I'm active and there's movement, I'm asking you to help me discover the purpose of this.
Absolutely.
And I'm not talking about everything happens for a reason.
No.
That contrite statement.
I agree. I don't think everything happens for a reason. I don't. But I do think that God uses everything. He wastes nothing. He can use anything. And that's what he's so resourceful. You know, there's pieces of my trauma that now I see coming full circle. The Lord's using it. And I'm like, I don't think that was his plan originally, but I think that he's so quick to adjust and he's so resourceful and he's so creative that anything that's happened, he's going to use it, you know, if you let him. And I think being a victim makes the healing process just take longer. And it also makes you go through cycles. So if you want to cycle back through what you've been through and you want to repeat that cycle, then be a victim, because you will. You'll wake up a year, 2, 5 years from now, and you'll be right back in the same place. But when you can choose not to be a victim and you can move forward as a victor instead, you'll see your healing accelerate and then have that purpose you're talking about. And again, I keep speaking in lyrics and songs because that was part of my healing too, is music and lyrics. But there's a Christine DeMarco song that says I'm not a victim, so go listen to it. You know, I'm not an orphan, I'm not a poor man. Like, those are all in that song. It's like I am none of those things that from the outside looking in, people would look at me and think, oh my gosh, like that poor woman, you know. And I'd never in my life been pitied so much, and I hate being pitied. But at this, like, I had the opportunity to show them, like, yes, this is as bad as it looks, but here's what I want to do with it. Here's the jumping off point that I can use it for.
So this leads to do you have other keys? Because I have one last question.
I'm looking at my list.
Something that you want to cover before I ask my last question.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Okay. So there's 2 more things. One is, and this, I have a life coach, so I just hired her a couple months ago. Again, it's more of a bookend. It's towards the end. It's more of the practical piece of what do you do after divorce? How do you process it? How do you release them?
Which
How do
is
you
healthy.
forgive them? Yes.
A lot of people just...
Yep. And she's been hugely key, because my therapist is all about helping me find healing from the past. My life coach is really, how do we move forward practically? What are the actions we take every day? What's our to-do list to reach our goals and our passions? And so her book called Divorce with Grace, her name's Lori Anderson, it talks about releasing that other person. And so I've been doing a lot of releasing work, forgiveness work. I actually wrote Abby's father a letter, fully releasing him, forgiving him, asking him to forgive himself, because at this point we got to move forward. We've co-parent, got to be friends, you know, to do what's best for her. So anyways, I would recommend someone who can give that practical application of what does healing look like in action? What does moving forward with your life look like in action? So whether you're going through a divorce situation or not, having someone kind of give you clarity is huge. Clarity is a big deal. So I would say she's been a huge key, but it's at the tail end.
Right.
It's a year and a half, 2 years in. I wouldn't have been able to do anything that she and I are doing right now a year ago, you know? And so again, it's part of that process.
In all of this, you've talked about God providing healing. And before, one of the things that I find amazing is that what God's done in my life is helped with the concept of you're not damaged goods.
Right.
Because that can paralyze us.
Right.
And that can even come from our own wounds, our own self-inflicted wounds. Mm-hmm. And you talked about God providing your healing. So my daughter, I go, you know, she's just goofy. She's nuts. She's crazy.
She
right?
is.
And
she's effervescent.
Oh, super. And so
she's extra.
Yeah, she's lucky. She's a Lucky Charms all rolled into one. So I looked at her like lately, the last couple of months. I've looked at her and be like, she'll be doing something effervescent. I'm like, who are you? Mm-hmm. And she'll be like, I'm a child of God. You know, kind of being a smart aleck, but she's like, I'm a child of God, a daughter of the King, being funny, right? Yeah. And so, but in that, where was your view of God, and how has God worked on His view of you through all of this?
All of this,
because it's had to have wandered.
Oh yeah.
If you tell me it didn't wander, I'm gonna call BS.
No, I definitely had to walk through a process of figuring out what misconceptions or ideas I had about him or how he felt about me. I mean, even now I'm still working through that. You know, the other day I I was asking the Lord, like, what do you think about me right now? Like waiting for a correction, waiting for him to be like, hey, you're moving too fast here. You're doing this wrong. And the only thing he said to me is, I'm so proud of you. And I was like, I don't know how to receive that, like I'm waiting for another directive, like, here's your next step, do it, and it was because there was so much of me learning how to be obedient through the whole process and him telling me to do things that I sure as heck didn't want to do. And there were definitely moments where 2 a.m. I'm standing at the end of my bed weeping, saying, please don't make me, please don't make me, please don't make me. And then I did it anyway. But so now to just hear that and that's it. And then there was another day that my mom was like, the Holy Spirit is really wanting to speak to you. He just wants you to ask him more. Like, he's not going to just force it on you like he did when you were in survival mode. Now it's about the relationship and the invitation and the back and forth. So she was encouraging me to,
Oh my gosh, you might have just extended this podcast a lot longer.
I know. I got to go pick up my Kroger click list.
I know. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
No, okay. So, oh my gosh, you just blew my mind with a question. So, what do you do when your relationship with God, the purpose of it feels like it changes? Because you just said survival mode, and your relationship with God was wrapped around this rescue and restoration and discovery. And now it leaves that trauma mode. Did you find I'm just kind of done with God for a little bit because I'm like, it's been so saturated? Or have you felt a transition in that?
Yeah, there was definitely a transition. So especially when I was pregnant, because I didn't have a child to distract me and rule my life, but I would spend hours. I stopped watching TV. All I had was worship music on. I would spend hours literally like snotting into my carpet in my bedroom, like weeping uncontrollably, journaling, praying. It was like I had the Holy Spirit on tap. Like it was an IV in my arm at all times. That's how I survived. And so then once I had her, all my attention shifted, right? As it should. You're a new mother. And I'm still dealing with the trauma. I'm still going through all the stuff. But this time now there's a baby. I'm trying to figure out breastfeeding. I'm trying to figure out all this stuff, And I remember telling my therapist, like, I feel like that constant flow is gone now. Like, what happened? Where did it go? And she's like, it's still there. Now you've got to go to it. It's like at one point you had waves crashing over you. Now you've got a still sweet pond, still the sustenance, still the water, still the everything you need's there. But now you've got to walk up to it and drink. And it takes a little bit more action.
So that moment, that was a moment for you. I just realized
lots of transitions.
That could be a moment for someone who feeling like when I was, how my relationship with God and how the Holy Spirit's, He's going to give you what you need. A lot of times when it starts to feel distant, it's not distant. It's just evolving. It's transitioning. It's changing. So don't get in the middle of healing and have it transition to something else and go, oh, where's God in all this?
Right. Exactly. He's just inviting you into a different level and a different place with him. And it's maturity, right? You go from glory to glory. So, when I was in the worst of the worst, he knew what I needed then, and he knew I didn't have the capacity to find him. He was like, here I am. I'm just going to dump what you need on you. But now he's inviting me into a greater level of maturity where it's more of a back and forth. And now I'm in a place where, like, even the singing and worshiping was for healing, and in recent months he's spoken to me about now it's for destiny and my future. And so I'm still pursuing it, but in a totally different way. It's no longer like I have to do this so that I can function. It's now a, Lord, what does my ministry look like? What does my future look like? How will I use this gift forever? Maybe full time. I have no idea what that looks like, but I'm pursuing it.
Which 4 years ago didn't exist.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Which is a shame. I'm just going to tell you that.
Cody, I know you've been mad at me.
I just got emotional.
Well, I mean, I can say that you
Sorry.
It's okay. But you've been key in me getting back to that. Like you've opened up the opportunities. Like had I not, and if you look, and another thing I want to speak to is part of those processes, those baby steps, there's some lyrics I want to read that are from Stephanie Gretzinger, a song called Oxygen. And it says, you are my oxygen. You are making me want to live again. Sometimes my very best is only my weakest yes. You see strength in every movement. Baby steps, short breaths, anything is progress. So, singing in youth group was my first thing, right? It's like a bunch of little kids that probably don't give a crap about what I'm singing, they're like, whatever. And then moving into big church once every 3-4 months. And now connections I've made in that community, like Chad and I led worship. Well, now he's he helped me plug in at a different church that's
Yep.
sort of affiliated, and now they've asked me to join a rotation team. I forgot to tell you about that, by the way.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, they called me and asked me if I would join, sing like once a month. And yeah, so anyways, I say that to say that all these little baby steps, they have connecting points, and then it's like all these seeds get planted, and then when you're ready, the Lord will then pull that opportunity up. And so again, I encourage people to take baby steps. Like sometimes you're like, this is such a small beginning and it may seem pointless, just do it anyway.
And I think what was key too is you didn't shut off voices. I don't think you shut off, I mean, the positive voices in your community. You didn't belittle them.
No. And
you didn't push back on any help. You know, your relationship with Allison has grown tremendously.
Yes.
And that was based on her not stopping and you not pushing away. Our friendship has grown, and those things that you're talking about, I'm kind of annoying. So I'm like, hey, you're gonna do this.
Yeah.
I mean, will you do this? But you're gonna do this.
Yeah.
And because I feel like I like to pull out what's best in people,
right?
That what God's done in them and has them for.
Yeah.
And so, but it didn't ever feel like you pushed any of the community away.
Well, at some point you have to realize that when you've arrived at a place of deep trauma, whether it's your fault or not, there are things that led up to that made me not trust myself. Obviously, I allowed myself to get to this point.
So good.
So when you need to realize, and again, it's that letting pride go. It's being humble enough to say, what's wrong? It's being humble enough to say, something got me here. Again, being a victim is saying they did it to me, which again, there was some truth to that. It was done to me, but there's also a large degree of things that I did to allow that to get to that point. So I didn't trust myself fully. So when you don't trust yourself, you say, hey, community, you all know me, you all love me. So I'm going to lean into what you're all seeing until I can see it for myself. And now I've gotten to a point where I don't hang on every word everyone else says, but I did for a while and I had to.
Real quick. I said this is the last question like 5 times. So I know you got to go to Kroger. You got to go to the zoo. I need to give Abby hugs.
Yeah.
Like a lot while you go to Kroger.
Okay.
Did you have a friendship that was there for the moment, but now has started to fade? It was there in the trauma for that and started to fade?
Yes, but not any of my dear close friends. Like there were, when I first started going through it, I was looking for a church, right? I was like desperate for a church that was a specific culture that had the healing aspect to it. And so I called this random pastor and was like, hey dude, what's your church about? And he was like, well, we actually aren't meeting anymore, but can I pray for you? I'm like, yeah. And so he's praying over me and he's like, he had a prophetic word. He was like, the Lord wanted me to tell you that he's going to put women in your life who have been through what you've been through to undergird you and help you walk through this. And I was like, cool, whatever. And then he did though. I mean, person after person. So there's people that I went to lunch with consistently, spoke with consistently that now I don't, but it's because they were needed for that period and that season.
And I think that's important for people who are going through pain and healing to understand that God's going to bring people just for that moment. Yep. And you don't have to romanticize the friendships or hold on to them as they're starting to go, but also look for new ones that may be just for that moment. Right. And in all of that too, I didn't feel much of a victim. I felt like there was pain. Absolutely. There was breakdown moments, but that doesn't mean victim. No. Right? You weren't trying to be too strong. No. And fake your way through it. But you also were always open. I know your mom, your dad, myself, Allison, Cole, Rachel.
My brother, yeah.
Even being your community, they weren't always just saying the sweetest things to you. No. There was real challenged. Truths in there. And so look for those. Yeah. And I think you were open to whatever God wanted to do, which when we're in pain and in trauma, we want a recluse, we want a turtle. Right.
Well, and also there's an aspect of sometimes they weren't right, and they would, fortunately my community.
I wasn't always right. Shocker.
Fortunately, my community was good enough at boundaries to say, this is what I feel, but I trust your Holy Spirit, meter there. And so there were times where I would take something and I'd weigh it for a few days or weeks and say, Lord, this advice sounds right, but what do you want? And there were times that I did not have a peace about it. And so I would go with what I felt the Lord wanted me to do, even if it was contradictory. And I'm glad I did, because there were times that it wouldn't have been the right thing.
And I think even with me, there was things that I would say that you were like, well, okay. But I knew that you were going to go pray about it and probably disagree with me. And that's okay, because you knew it was for you.
Yeah.
And you and I have had to navigate I almost said a word that was the wrong way to describe it, but just a difficulty because the role that the whole thing put me in, but it never, there was always a genuineness to it, and we didn't always agree, but it never got in the way.
But we also respected each other's positions. Like, you couldn't imagine being in my position. I couldn't imagine being in yours. So it was more of a processing. Like, we were both just processing out loud.
That's true.
And it wasn't necessarily a, you do this or you do, you know, it's just more of a, how do I process this?
And you know what? Also, your community did a really good job. And this is advice for people. Your community never tried to fix very often. I don't remember anybody trying to fix. Your dad may have tried to fix a couple of times, but that's not what we're talking about. I think everybody was just like,
his fix would have been illegal, I think.
Yeah, I think there was help, but not fixing.
Well, there's support. It was, at the end of the day, what I would hear from people was, whatever you feel. Hi, baby. Buddy. Yeah. Do you need a buddy? Is that what you're saying? But I think that at the end of the day, it was, here's what we think, but whatever you decide. Here, honey, here's your phone. But whatever you decide, we're going to support. That was the message I received. And so people trusted the Holy Spirit and me enough. And I think that may not always be the case. I've seen people go through trauma who they really just needed someone to step in and be like, absolutely not. Like, this is bad. You're destructive. Like, we got to come in and take some control. But my community didn't have to do that. So the message I heard the most was, here's what I think, but whatever you decide, we'll support. And that in a way was great, and in a way was scary. What's wrong, baby?
Well, I think the reason that's great and scary is because you weren't artificially being propped up.
No.
Because then it's not a discovery of you again. No. It's relying on someone else to tell you if you're healed, relying on someone else to tell you if you're okay. And I'm not saying like you're going to make it okay, and encouragement, you know, or calling out at what God has created you to be. That's not what I'm talking about. But you can be artificially propped up in pain by your support system because they're feeding you, and you're not discovering who you are and relying on God, which then if they leave, or it dissolves a little bit, you end up fragile and broken and back in an unhealthy relationship, which is a whole nother topic or whatever.
Right.
At that
which
point.
I think is why I would circle back to, it's so important to have unbiased third party, like inner healing ministry at your church. Those people don't know you, or they might know you a little bit, but their whole goal is to help foster what the Holy Spirit's wanting to do. A therapist is going to be doing what's best for you. A life coach is going to be helping you find clarity, whether it's with your family or despite your family, you know? And so that's why, and I really respected that my family all respected that too. Like, I'd be like, nope, this is what my therapist is saying, and it's contradictory to what you all think, and I am going to go with what she's saying because I feel a peace about it. And they're like, got it, awesome. You know, like they were glad that I had some voices outside of them, because they were just as emotionally damaged as I was in some ways. Like,
Absolutely.
they were reeling from trauma, and they had to know that they were going through that, and they would deal with it with each other because they were very careful about how I heard their trauma. But a lot of times if your family's going through it with you, they may not be the best source of actual literal advice. They may be great for support because they're trying to figure out how to process themselves. And so, you know, and it triggered, even in my parents, it triggered old wounds for them that they then started going to their own counselor again because they're trying to process through their old wounds because of how it's being triggered from my situation. And so I was really thankful for them doing that. I'm like, please deal with your own stuff too, you know, in addition to me dealing with mine. So yeah, it created a ripple effect for sure.
I think the biggest key that you know, that I've seen in your story is movement.
Yeah. Never stop. It's those baby steps. It's one step at a time. Like I said, if you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. And that was something I didn't know how to do, because I'm like I said, I make things missions and I run after them, and I couldn't. Like, when you're in that much trauma, you can't. And so it was really just a lesson of, what can you do? If it's literally just you took a shower today, great, and sometimes it's as simple as that. And then when you do that and you have those little bitty mile markers, then you can get to the big stuff, like a 5K 2 years later, but that was a big thing for me. Some of you are like, that's only 3.1 miles, Tara. I know. But yes, so I think the big word at the end of this conversation is process. And I hate that word. And most of us do. We don't like process. We want to arrive, and you won't. There's never an arrival point. And even now, like, I've started a new season of my life where I don't think it's a secret. I don't really talk about it a lot, but I started the dating process. Again, part of the encouragement from my therapist and my mom. And it was, you're ready. Am I really? Are you sure? But even that now has uncovered new insecurities I didn't realize were there, new fears. Now, working through that process, how do you do relationship with someone new when you have only literally had one person in your life your entire adult life? There's so much that goes into that, but it's still part of the process. I'm still going through healing, and new things are still getting little flashlights on them. And I'm like, ooh, that's ugly. Let's deal with that, And so I still go to therapy once a month. I honestly don't know when I'll stop. Like, I need her so much to help me weather through going back to work as a mother. There's always something. And so I will tell you that it's a process, and it's a never ending one. And once you can settle into that and know that you won't just arrive at healing, and you'll continually have to pursue it, you'll be better off,
But thank you so much. I know you've got to go. You've got a big day ahead, and I just appreciate your transparency and your openness. Awesome. Thank you so much. Hey, thank you for taking the time to listen. I appreciate it. Again, like always, you can leave comments, questions, or you're like, that didn't make any sense. What are you talking about? Because a lot of times I never know what I'm talking about. And leave that in there. I really, really appreciate it. Please share. And if you have questions, a lot of the topics that we talk about come from questions that you've had. And again, thank you so much, and we hope you have a great day.